Governor Andrew Cuomo's top aide announcing her resignation overnight. Melissa DeRosa was mentioned 187 times in that 168-page report by the New York Attorney General, which concluded that the governor sexually harassed 11 women and created a toxic work environment. The report found DeRosa played an active role in dismissing accusations from those women. In a statement, Melissa DeRosa says the past 2 years have been emotionally and mentally trying. Meantime, Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul is preparing to replace Governor Cuomo within the next few weeks, according to reports. Joining me now to discuss, Democratic strategist Kevin Walling. Kevin, do you think that the governor resigns? Because, again, he is dug in. And maybe they jettison Melissa DeRosa. Maybe she's sacrificing herself. But does Cuomo get out of there?
Yeah, Dagen, it's a good question. I mean, this governor is the most prideful guy we've ever seen. He has no humility. He's lost all ability to govern the Empire State. I called for his resignation back in March, not just on the sexual harassment and assault front, but also on the nursing home front that we can't keep not discussing as part of this, because that's just equally, if not more, troubling. So he's a prideful guy. I hope every leading Democrat, including the president, has called for his resignation. The Assembly Democrats are moving forward in Albany to introduce articles of impeachment, I think, as early as today. So the writing's on the wall for the governor, and he has no way out except to step down.
Kevin, both Jonathan and Sean Duffy are here. Sean, jump in.
Yeah, hey, Kevin. So, listen, I think it's really challenging. As you mentioned, you have a sex scandal, you have violence on the streets, the nursing home scandal. I mean, if you're Lee Zeldin, you're probably who's running for governor against Cuomo as a Republican. If you're Lee Zeldin, you're like, this is great. You should stay there, Governor Cuomo, because I'm going to beat you in a really blue state because everyone's sick of Cuomo. Am I right on that? I mean, and shouldn't every Democrat call for his resignation?
Amen. I mean, the entire congressional delegation, Democrats have called for his resignation because he will be a drain on the ballot. Of course, he's up in 2022. And Lee Zeldin has a great campaign to run against him in terms of not just, his handling of the pandemic, but, of course, these 11 women that have come forward. All of those allegations have been corroborated. So the governor is such a drain, I think, on Democrats across the state. I don't know if it has necessarily national implications. I think it's likely just relegated to New York at this point. But certainly he will be a drag on this ticket if he doesn't do the right thing and step down.
Jonathan?
Yeah.
Well, you said it, Kevin. The writing is on the wall, right? And it's not invisible ink. Everybody can see it.
Exactly right, Jonathan.
I think what's interesting at this point is that he's facing the prospect of criminal charges at this point. And I wonder what would have happened if back in March he'd have done the right thing and simply stepped down. But now we've had a report released by the New York Attorney General Letitia James. So I would actually ask you, Kevin, is there any chance whatsoever that the New York legislature decides not to impeach him? And then also, is there any chance, I guess, what's the real chance that criminal charges will be waged against him?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jonathan. It's two parts. I think, the Assembly has no choice but to move forward. There was a call right after that report came out on Tuesday with the Assembly Democrats. There was no one that came forward in support of the governor. So he is on an island. And because the last, decade or so in elected life, he's a bully. He's made no allies for the most part in Albany. So these men and women in Albany are cheering for this guy to go, both on the Republican side and the Democratic side. I think your point about criminal charges is a very good one, Jonathan, in that, 4 separate DA offices are now looking about filing charges. I think, Dagen mentioned Melissa DeRosa stepping down. Right. I think she could also face criminal prosecution as more comes to light in that AG's report about the extent that she did to cover this up and to attack these women that have come forward. So the governor has not just a real aspect of losing office relatively soon, but also facing criminal prosecution, hopefully.
Speaking of that, Kevin, one of the Governor Cuomo's accusers spoke out in a new interview over the weekend, identifying herself for the first time, Brittany Comiso, known as Executive Assistant Number 1 in the Attorney General's report, saying that the governor groped her on 2 separate occasions inside the executive mansion. And then she said Cuomo must be held accountable. Listen to this.
Why did you file that criminal complaint with the sheriff's office?
It was the right thing to do. The governor needs to be held accountable.
And just so I'm clear again, being held accountable to you means seeing the governor charged with a crime.
What he did to me was a crime. He broke the law.
Kevin, I'm glad that you brought up the nursing home order that he signed last March and that led to the death of 15,000 or more elderly people here in New York City, because a lot of the grieving relatives, including Janice Dean, feel like that is being forgotten, and they want to remember, and they want Cuomo to pay for what he did, and the fact that he covered it up and lied about it and then wrote a multi-million-dollar book and won an Emmy. The list goes on. But explain to me, there was a fundraiser that Cuomo held just a few weeks ago, and I think he raised about $1 million. Who in their right mind would give this man, knowing everything? This is before the Attorney General's report. Why would anyone give him money for a re-election campaign, knowing what they knew about him, because they had bet on him for so many decades, that they had this big investment in him and they were just doubling down or tripling down? Why would a donor hand this man more money?
Yeah, Dagen, it's a good question. I think, he has a cult of personality. And his family is one of the most established families, despite being an immigrant family that has a storied past in the Empire State. And he has built this network of supporters over decades in support of his father, and then his work in the 90s, and then now as Attorney General, and then as governor. So he's an entrenched interest with a lot of powerful friends that I think are still backing him. But luckily, all of his supposed friends in elected life on the Democratic side at least have called for his resignation, because, to quote the vice president, dude's got to go.
I watched that, his own response with the photos of him hugging people. That was pretty hard to take. But what was worse were his attorneys and the presser that they did at the end of last week, where, again, it was blame the victim and calling these women liars. And
it's horrific.
It was hard to watch. And it raises the issue of, does the Democratic Party stand up for women and, believe all women? Do they? Because his lawyers and Cuomo, they were throwing these women under the bus. I'm just going to leave it there. But, Kevin, it was great to see you. We'll see what happens. Thank you for being here this morning.
Thanks, Dagen. Good to be with you.
Much appreciate it.